lot of gospel songs in the gospel style that I was raised up in that has it's the passing chords, the chords on the way to the next chord, from the one to the two. It could be, you gotta it's the passing chord, and a lot of that I get from listening to organ and keyboard players. I listened to them all my life, and it just transitioned over to my playing because I was such a fan of it, and I'm like, man, let me start trying to do this. As a kid, I was like, man, I really want to try to, and finding the chords were just uh, by mistake. I would just be randomly putting my fingers on the guitar, and whatever came out until I moved a finger here and moved a finger there. And that was the process that happened for me for years until I built a catalog of stuff that, like, okay, this will work here and this will work there. But a lot of it is just trial and error. So a lot of that world, from the jazz world, from the gospel world, from the R&B world, all of that fused into me as a blues guitar player. Blues, rock, funk, gospel, R&B, hip hop, classical, all of this, country western, all of this, So I'm often sometimes labeled as a blues guitar player, but I'm much, much more than a blues guitar player. My inspiration tree goes from everywhere, country western to avant-garde to classical to symphonic to everything. And I am very thankful for all of those inspirations seeping into my life, because I believe it's what is the element that sets me apart from being your traditional blues guitar player. I don't have a problem at all with being a blues guitar player, but there are other facets of music that captivate me that I think is what has enabled me to be who I am, by fusing them all together, at any random given point in time. There's no process or osmosis to how I fuse it together. I just go with where I'm feeling. And what comes out is what comes out. And to date, I don't think, for me, in my own opinion, it has never disappointed me of where I let go and let it wind up landing at. And it's a beautiful thing. It enables me to end up in interviews with people like you are asking me the question of how do you do that? So I think I'll keep it going. And I'm not saying that in a braggadocious way or, big-headed. I'm just stating the facts of what I see myself doing. And I think it's a beautiful culmination, man, of a lot of different things fused together, such as an example of what this world should be. When you take everything and put it all together, man, we all are placed here for, one common goal. And man, when you put this with that and that with this and this with that. So if what I'm telling you of my musical style can show the beauty, then just think about what it could do in the world.
A lot of our readers, I think, from the blues point of view, they're used to the sort of pentatonic shapes that everybody sort of starts playing when they first engage.
And so am I. I'm a big fan.
So, but how does your soloing style differ? Do you still base what you do on those pentatonic?
I base a lot of it still around the pentatonic, but I have like an altered definition of the pentatonic. You have your 5-note pattern, your 4-note pattern, but a lot of this, I just was texting with Eric Johnson yesterday. We did a gig in Dover, and there were the cliffs of Dover. So I took a picture in front of the cliffs of Dover and sent a picture to him, and he said, oh man, that's amazing. And we chatted for a minute, but a lot of that come from the intel that I acquired from a lot of the influence from Eric Johnson. And, it's not your typical pentatonics. It's like, you'll, do a repetitive 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know what I mean? So instead of you're, and then it makes it different. And that is the basis of how riffing is with me. It is consistently involving things that are not the anticipatory standard of what a pentatonic and whatever number metric system that it may be. You know, it's just a combination of 3, 5, 4, then repetitive and up the scale and down the scale and up the steps and back down the steps, and that is something that I don't have. There's not a particular mythology to it. There is no set pattern that I could explain to the viewers out there. The best way that I'm explaining it is by how I'm explaining it now. And there is no method to it. It's whatever you come up with that works great for you, because it's exactly how I came around with what it is that has you asking me questions about what it is that I do. It was no method. It's just, man, look, that feels and sounds great. You get a lot of people so headstrong on 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3. That's great. That's the perfect way to start. But then once you get that, erase that, because now that is kind of like secondary. You breathe in that. Erase that, and now just let it flow. Just freely flow. Then that's where the natural part will begin to surface. And that's exactly how the process happened for me. And that I didn't even know that was happening at the time, but that's just what happened. And then turned into, wow, this and this and that. And then you blend it with the chords, you blend it with the gospel, the R&B and the jazz, and boom, 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 the rock, the Delta blues. All of that began to come. And I'm like, man, I am curating a melting pot of some pretty good stuff, man. And that's basically all that it is. That's the easiest way for me to try to describe how I came to be with this. I don't even dawn on me to even register that I'm playing in a way that is not normal of what the world is. Who's to say that I'm right and everybody else is wrong? You know what I'm saying? Who's to say? But there's no way that is technically the right way. Whatever works for you. So add on top of that, man, I'm doing this left-handed, upside down, and backwards. So I want people that's reading or watching this interview to understand that, man, don't enter this chat room feeling like you're defeated because you're watching somebody do stuff that plays the exact opposite from you. Here's why I say that, because 95% of the people that I learned from and I was inspired by were right-handed players. So if I were to have allowed that to stifle me and say I can't do it because they play the other way, then I never would have even gave myself a chance. So I was so driven by the inspiration of what I was listening to that it didn't matter how they were playing it. I was going to figure it out some way or another. So if the inspiration drive is strong enough, it can be anything. It can defeat anything. It will take all of the nervousness, all of the I can't, and then it'll turn it into I can. So that's what happened for me. And that's the best I can give, is what happened for me and how how I approached the situation. I'm like, man, I'm going to figure this out. Half of everything that I know, I picked up from, Eric Johnson, Robin Trower, and Frank Marino, and all of these cats. And all of them were right-handed players. And I was like, dude, that sounds so good, man. I got to figure out how to do it. And, and I kept going until I was like, man, okay, it's getting close. It's getting close. Now, man, it sounds exactly like it. I would play me doing some of their stuff, and I would play them doing some of their stuff. And at a point, I couldn't tell the difference. And I'm like, yo. But it took legwork. It took the work. And the thing is, you got to keep pursuing, man. There will be those days that you get frustrated. There will be those days that to you your finger's not working right like you want. I mean, but you put it away for a second, come back to it, and go back to it. Just keep going. Keep going. That's the only way. Only way.
So I'm sure, sort of asking on behalf of readers who would doubtless want to ask this question, but how do you add to the pentatonic scale? Because you use passing notes in soloing as well. Where did that develop from?
There also lies the injection of the blues. I mean, the blues and all of these other styles that randomly insert themselves while I'm thinking in a pentatonic fashion that just surfaces, that comes through, and that is, you can, it just, it's just a healthy dosage of blues and everything else. Once you get the technicality of the pentatonic in there, now you have to, if you just cooked a piece of meat and you didn't put no seasoning, no salt and pepper, no, spices or something on it, it would be just a bland piece of meat. You have to add some stuff to give it the flavor. And that's all it is. That's the word I've been looking for. It's just a little bit of flavor. And how I acquire that, technically, I don't know the answer. But all I know is I pull from a lot of different areas that is infused in with what is the technical pentatonic scale mixed with any and every other thing that feels right and feels good. And at the end of the day, sometimes you have to throw technicality out of the window and go strictly off what feels and sounds good. And that's the best answer that I have. I mean, that's all that I have, and through trial and error, trying stuff, just, what you try stuff that might not work. It might not work for that, but another style of another tune or something like that, I guarantee you it might work for that. So some stuff you learn and put it on the shelf to use for when necessary. So that's, and all of this, there was no rule book for acquiring this information. I was just watching and I was like, yo, that sounds great, man. I'm gonna learn that, and it's gonna come to use later on somewhere. Pick it up. The Malmsteens and the Tony McAlpines and the Greg Howes and all of these guys. I listen to Steve Vais, the Joe Satrianis, the Paul Gilberts, and all of that stuff. Now, that's not particularly my curriculum vitae, but if I needed to dip into that world, I'm not uncomfortable with it. That's more of the what they call the shredder. Your Van Halens and hey man, that's some really the Jared James. All of those cats, man, that are out there. Are doing their thing, man, and my hat's off to them, man. I am highly inspired by them, and just it's just a combination of everything, man. Learn everything, and you'll wind up with a pot of gumbo. Yeah.
So, what would you recommend people practice if they want to move forward with their sort of blues playing? I mean, would you, for instance, I mean, there's the sort of scholarly approach where you sit down with a metronome and predict
And that's great. That's awesome.
and
I
everything.
still say that. I still say that. Um, I think there's an element of always incorporating that with a metronome is great because it will then, slowly but surely, once you continually speed up the metronome, if speed is something that you're trying to, hone in on a little more, slower to faster, but clean. You don't want to be going slow to fast and it's all messy. You want accuracy. You want, if that's what you're aiming for. If you're aiming for inaccuracy, if you're aiming for messiness, then keep doing what you're doing. If you're aiming for accuracy and cleanliness, then do it and don't speed it up until you are inspired by yourself. Until you listen back and say, oh, that was pretty damn good. Don't go forward until that happens. And that's the same way it happened for me. And I would go and go a little faster, and then if a little faster wasn't accurate enough for me, as many times that I say I'm gonna do it this many times, and I need to hit the mark every time. If I missed one of them out of it, then I slowed it back down. It's a lot of tedious work into it, but man, hey man, it got me where I'm having this interview with you right now.
Can you give us a couple of examples of your rhythm style? Because that is another sort of unique facet of your
Sure,
style.
sure, here we go.
Of course, I'm going to ask you how you developed that style.
And again, I have to revert to the same answer. Same answer. It's a combination of a whole lot of things, man. Just learning everything. You know, it's got a little bit of chicken picking in there, funk, you know, a little bit of solo and chords, passing chords. That what I just played contains the element of like 5 or 6 different things that I just mentioned previously. You know, passing chords, you know, chicken picking, funk. You know, that's off of one of my own tunes called "See a Bad Blood." That, you know, I kind of toyed with a little bit, but it was kind of my direction towards, you know, the funk world, and, you know, just you know, a little bit of country western kind of seeped in there a little bit too, and you know, with an element of blues still in there. You know, even though it's a funk tune, you still got an element of blues that, you know, permeates through it all. You know, which for me, blues and gospel kind of resonates the same to me. You know, old traditional blues and old traditional gospel to me is the exact same thing. The only difference is one has worldly words, the other has religious words. You know, the old style, Lightning Hopkins, it's the same feeling that you get from both styles, old blues and old gospel. And that is the foundation of who I am. Everything else is which was gravy on top. And I'm glad that my foundation was set in such a thick soil, and that helped rooted me to branch off with a whole lot of other stuff to do, such as what I just played, such as "See a Bad Blood" and chordal riffing, funk, you know, type stuff. Straight to you guys. Don't stop what you're doing, no matter the amount of frustration that comes to you, no matter how many days that you end up frustrated. The days that you aren't frustrated are going to outweigh them. Keep yourself surrounded by the right people. Don't let the woes of this world suck you in, and try to stay inspired. With those things, I think you got a winning chance. Keep doing what you're doing, and all else fails, listen to Crown.